Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are at. Thank you for clicking on this video today. My name is Matthew Bonig. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you a little bit about the new CDK Lightbox. So a little warning, this is still very much alpha. It's pre-release. This is needing a lot of development effort, but that's why I've been asking the community for some help. I'm going to cover some of where the application currently sits, some of the visions I have for it in the future, and then kind of discuss about how you can get involved and help me out with all of this if you would like to. All right, so this is a very simple application I've got loaded up here. In this case, it was actually a CDK app that I had built to do some testing around the functional URL feature that was released in the CDK a little while back. When we start, let's go ahead and actually start over from scratch. So when we start, we just get a basic splash page, and now I can go ahead and hit a button, and you're not seeing it here on my screen, but I get a standard file open button here, and I'll go ahead and pick out the root directory of my CDK application. And to begin with, it's always going to start by only showing me the first 3 levels of constructs. So what I mean by that is this is a very simple one stack, one app application. So I have my application here. We can use a scroll window and zoom in on it a little bit. So I have my app here. And underneath that, I've got my one stack, the CDK dev stack. And as you can see, I can kind of drag everything around however I want to here. So I can drag my stack around, and everything below it drags along with it. In there was a role, which I created I called it the assumable role. That was the ID I gave it. So I see the ID here at the top, and then I see the type of construct it is down below. So it comes from the AWS IAM namespace, and it's just a standard role. I've also got my AWS Lambda function here called test function. Now underneath that, I've got a part of that test function, and now we're getting into just the standard L2 construct. I've got a functional URL object here, a resource object, a code object, and a service role. Now I'm only again seeing the first 3 levels here. I can actually go ahead and hit this to show level 4, and now I can see everything that was kind of below that as well. Now you can see here right away, it's not really placing everything great. It's sort of just overlapping right now. The algorithm that I put in here to begin with for placing constructs before you start dragging and dropping them around, very basic. This is one of the open issues, and if you like dealing with these sorts of issues, please come out and try to tackle this. So if you can see here, I've got this resource object. The name of it is just resource. That's what it was called in the CDK code, and it's a CFN role type. And I've got things like a staging asset, an asset bucket, and these things as part of code. If I come up here, I can see my functional URL L2 construct has this CFN URL, the L1 underneath of it. And then up here, we can see default policy and other things. So I can use this filter to very easily restrict down how much I'm seeing at one time. If I just want to see the very first level, if I just care about, high level what stacks, that's a level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, so on and so forth. I mean, I can keep going all the way up if I want to. This is a fairly small repository, so nothing really past level 4 here. So let's go back to level 3. So I have my constructs here. Now additionally, you can see here there's a little icon, this little eyeball here. If I go ahead and I click on this, it'll go ahead and hide that construct. Maybe it's one that I don't care about. It's an L1 that I just generally don't care too much about. I can get rid of that. Now if I click that accidentally, well, I do have an undo feature. I can come here and just undo this. Apparently that's not working right now. Got to fix that. I'll put that as an open issue. But there's this show hidden button down here. Now, even if I've decided to hide, this will temporarily show any sort of hidden. You can see here the icons actually changed a little bit to show that it's hidden. I don't love these icons. I just grabbed them off of a free site real quick to get something in there. Again, this is an open issue on the board. If you like dealing with icons and iconography, this sort of UX type of thing, by all means, please try to tackle that issue. So moving on, let's say I want to go ahead and unhide that. So that's pretty much it. Now, once I've got everything kind of laid out, let's say this is the general look and feel of how everything I want. Let's actually arrange this so I can see everything at one time. Go ahead and move these guys over here. And that's probably good enough to start with. Now I can come up to the file menu, and there's an option here for exporting. Looks like this current build I have doesn't have that. Let me go actually load that up and find that while we're talking. All right, so I got this all here, and if I come up to an export menu, I can hit a magic button, and this will save out a ping file format. I can pick which file, and then if we go take a look at that real quick. All right, so here's a screenshot just saved as a diagram.ping file here. I decided to save this in the same directory. Always good to have, a little diagram to go with your documentation. And that's it. That's kind of the whole goal of this is you point this at a CDK application, you load the thing up, you decide which constructs you want to look at, you rearrange in the way that you want to for your diagram, and then you export this out as a ping file, and then this becomes part of your documentation process. Something that you can talk about with your implementers, the rest of your DevOps team, or whoever needs to know about this architecture that you've got. So that's kind of the quick and dirty demo. Obviously, there is still a lot of room to grow on this. This is still alpha pre-release. Today's June 14th. I sort of just announced this and released it, although I've been working on it for a little while. I am looking to get help on some of these things. So I wanted to take a moment, kind of talk to you about the vision, the things that I know aren't there yet that I'd like to see there at some point. So let's go ahead and get rid of the screenshot for now. So, so let's talk real quick about some of these changes that I both know are coming and that I've got issues open for, and other things I just sort of like to chat about improvements in the future. So first off, as we take a look at all of these constructs that are displayed here, there really isn't much information. Currently, this is all working off of the tree.json file that's part of the cdk.out. And in that tree.json, you get a good structure of all the constructs, but what you don't get is the details of those constructs. So I can show you here, like in the case of my stack here that I'm moving around, this my stack dev. You can see that I got the ID of it, I've got the type, but I don't have like any of the properties that are set. When I first started putting this all together, I figured they would go in sort of that gray box that you see there as part of the widget. But that part's not built in yet. I don't know if it really makes more sense to go to the rendered cloud formation and get out those properties from the JSON file and render them nicely, or if it would actually be worth going a step further and going into the actual code that you've written yourself and try to extract out the properties that are defined there. Because if I go to the cloud formation, well, none of the L2s or L3s are going to have properties. Only the L1s I would only be able to show you the properties for the L1s. But that's not really all that useful. You really want to know what are the properties on the L2s and the L3s that you've been building. So that would require some fancy work to go down into the actual source code itself, try to figure out where these things are defined within your source code, and then extract those properties properly. And maybe there's some functionality within the TypeScript language that would make that happen easily. Or maybe this is just parsing source code. I haven't decided yet what the best approach is, but that's what I'd really like to see going forward in the future. Definitely a forward-looking feature, something that's not even really close to being in place yet. As far as a lot of the minor cosmetic issues here, again, things like the hide and show buttons here, they're not great. I'll admit they're again just sort of placeholders for now. One of the things that I'd like to finish or clean up a lot is just the general sort of UX. I think this is a okay enough start, but there are lots of little things that probably need to be addressed. For example, let's say I start zooming out here. As soon as I get to about this level right here, which you're probably if you've got a big enough project, this is a very small project, and already, if I zoom in enough here, I can see everything fairly clearly, not too much of a problem. But if this was a much larger project, if this really represented like a 3-tier application, you're likely going to have to zoom quite a ways out before you see anything meaningful. And then all the text that exists here isn't useful. you can't read it anymore. So there needs to be a way to solve that. I don't know the best way to do it. There could be simply a case of trying to make the text a little bit bigger or resizing these elements as you zoom out. Again, looking for some ideas on how best to do that. I was playing around with some code the other day that literally just scaled the font up as you zoomed out, but that introduced all sorts of other issues, like then the text was actually overrunning the original size of the widget, and if I tried to size the widget accordingly, well, then it really wasn't like you were zooming out at all. As you zoomed out, everything got bigger, and that didn't really work either. So if you have some examples of how other apps have maybe addressed this, please hit me up over on the cdk.dev Slack channel called CDK Lightbox, and let's talk about this and figure out a good way forward on it. Also, some things like some of the colorings. It doesn't really show up here great on this one. I can sort of start to see it here. The colors of like the L4 or the level 4 objects, this sort of deeper blue. The text right now is still black. On a darker blue, it gets lost pretty easily. Minor things like that really need to be cleaned up and kind of handled so it works a little bit better. Looks like I still need to address perhaps the, so this particular branch, the undo feature, is actually working correctly, so that's good to know. So I just need to get this branch merged in and we should be good. Other things, kind of looking forward to seeing how to resolve these. Right now, these lines that are showing up between these different widgets, they kind of show a little bit of scope. I don't think that's really clearly obvious at this point. If you've been building CDK apps long enough, you kind of understand scopes and the tree that goes with it, but I think there's probably a little bit better way to visualize this. Right now, as we move these things around, let's say I start to drag it down here below its stack. Notice how the line sort of just jumps. One of the reasons why I did that was because the way the lines are drawn, and because this uses a library called Conva, Konva, for handling all the drawings of these objects on a canvas, the ordering matters. And technically, these lines are at a higher Z index than the parent scope. So this line right here, while it's sort of, you can kind of see as I move this thing around, the end of the line is actually at the center of this test function. You can see as I kind of move it around, you can kind of imagine if the line sort of continued on into the center of the box there. And as things move around, it's sort of nice and makes a little bit of sense. But it attaches hard on this point over here, because if I tried to also have this line start on the my stack dev, I'll tell you what, let me go and turn on, see if I can get my cursor to show up in here so you can actually see what I'm pointing at along the way. Oh, no, I can only do that if we go with a full screen, and I'm not going to do a full screen share. But anyway, so this test function right here, its line draws back to the my stack dev stack, and it really stops on that edge, because if I continued it on until the center of that box, then it would actually draw on top of it. There wasn't a real convenient way for me to get it to draw underneath. You can't force a Z index on these things like you can in CSS. So, this was sort of a stopgap measure, so things didn't look bad. But again, I don't love it, so I'd like to try to improve that over time. Additionally, there's some minor little quality of life things. I mentioned the level filters down here in the lower right before. I can increase up to like 4, level 3, level 2, things like that. What I'd really like to do is actually change this so that I also have an option on here for hiding all level 1s. So maybe I want to show all my possible levels, level 5, level 6, level 7, but I don't want to show anything that starts with a CFN. So that would just be a simple checkbox down here that says, hide L1s, and then I never see them along the way. And that's, kind of the beginnings of it. A lot of things I think could use some improvement on here. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas on ways to improve this. Again, this is an open source project. Like I don't own this really. I'm not trying to be the gatekeeper to any of this functionality. I'm not trying to be the one who necessarily either creates it all or really owns the entire thing from a like it's my way or the highway sort of thing. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to see this. I want this to really be a community developed project for the CDK community. So all ideas, submit PRs, suggest them in issues, whatever it may be. I definitely want a lot of feedback on this and a lot of encouragement from the community on how to get it built. So that's it for now. As this project continues, I'll continue to do these types of videos on how it works and build these things out. But in the meantime, please head over to the GitHub link. I'll provide a link here in the video in the description. And if you have any questions or problems, again, issues, and in the cdk.dev Slack channel. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.